Who is JoAnne McArthur?
It's a funny question. Who is JoAnne McArthur? JoAnne McArthur is someone who cares a lot. And, once I started opening my eyes to animal abuses, there was no way that I could turn away. And so, I'm a regular person who just won't turn away from the things that I see. I'm an activist, I'm a photojournalist, and I'm someone who puts my care into action every single day. And there's so many ways we can do that, and that's the great thing about helping animals in this world. We can stop eating animals, we can use our skills, whatever they are, to make the world a better place. So there's lots that we can do, and so that's who JoAnne McArthur is, just someone who's, I'm someone who's using my skills to make the world a better place for animals by taking pictures.
What is your book about?
Okay, what is my book about? So the We Animals book is about the invisible animals in our world, and that's what I call them. These are the animals we actually have a really close relationship to, but we fail to see them. We eat them, we wear them, we use medicine that's tested on them, and yet they remain invisible. And yet these animals suffer by the billions because of us. And so the book is about these animals and just making their lives visible, whether it's a pig in a factory farm or a chimp, who was rescued from a lab. We need to see who they are, because these animals suffer by the billions, but we can't feel that, right? Like we can't really understand those numbers. And so the billions are made up of individuals, and the book is about showing the individuals who are trapped in these terrible places that we put them unnecessarily. So it's a big, sad book about, from sheep to pigs to orca whales. And it's also, the book is a piece of history. That's the way I see it. It's an archive, and it is a testament to what is, and hopefully what will no longer be, and what should never be again. I'd like to have this book as this horrible museum piece, of things that we used to do, the atrocities we used to commit against animals, proof of what happened so that it never happens again.
On the cover, we can see Ron, a chimpanzee who you call your teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What can animals teach us through your pictures?
So, as for what we can learn from the animals in the book, and including Ron, who I call my teacher, I say that he was my teacher because he had such a big personality. No one would ever have known or cared, except he was rescued, and he had the opportunity for people to see what he was like. And he was such a gentleman, and he was kind, and he was forgiving, considered everything that we put him through for years. He lived in a 5-foot by 5-foot by 7-foot cage for years. He went through terrible, terrible invasive surgeries, and yet he remained a very forgiving and kind gentleman. Actually, when the new chimpanzees go to that sanctuary, they often introduce them to Ron, because he was a welcoming committee. And you meet someone like Ron, and you see the individuality. It's so clear. It's clear with some people more than others, right? And so that he just exuded big personality, and so you see that of course he's an individual, but that sort of extends for me to all the animals. Look at how complex and interesting this animal is, this chimpanzee, and they're all like that. Chickens are like that. Chickens are hilarious animals with big opinions, big personalities as well. And pigs as well. Pigs are so smart, and we just kill them by the billions. It's so going back to your question about what can people learn from the animals in this book, is that they are individuals, and we just forget that. We are just speciesist. We think that we are up here and the others don't matter, but they're all individuals. They all have personalities, and they all have desires, and they all have a care and a concern for their own freedom. That's all we want. It's the basic principle of life. We want to be free to choose our families, do what we want, and not be slaves. And so the book hopefully is an opportunity for people to see these animals for who they are, a little glimpse. When I make eye contact with them through the lens, they're looking into my lens. So that means they're looking at anyone who's looking at that picture. And it's not often that we get to make eye contact with animals. We don't take the opportunity, we don't care, it's not something we think about. But you see these pictures, a rabbit going to slaughter, she's looking into the camera, clearly she's in a state of fear, and Ron and so many others. So we can see them, and hopefully with that, it inspires change.
Your camera is a tool for?
The camera is a tool for change. The camera is one of the most powerful weapons in the world, and that's why I love it. It creates documents that are irrefutable. Photos are proof. Photos galvanize people, and we've seen proof of that throughout history. Photos show history in the making, and that's why I love the camera. It's also faster than painting, so.
So you have photographed animal cruelty in Spain. Is there a bigger animal cruelty in Spain than in any other country where you have taken other pictures?
Well, it's interesting. When I travel from country to country to speak about my work, people always want to know how things look in their own country as opposed to other countries. And what I've seen is that whether I'm photographing factory farming in Australia or Spain or Sweden or Canada, it looks the same. We have the very modern and clean barns, and then we have the terrible, disgusting, unclean places. And I've seen that in Spain, and I've seen that elsewhere. It's like whoever's designing this machinery in these buildings, it's like all the same designer, and things look the same. But what I'm seeing here and worldwide is that people are finally starting to care about animal welfare. It's finally on the agenda, it's on the political agenda, it's in the streets, it's in the restaurants, it's on the store shelves. And so that's something that I'm seeing here, is that more and more people care, the younger people care. People are really becoming aware of the cruelty involved in using animals in entertainment. So Spain is famous for the corrida. And what I'm seeing is that younger people are, less engaged in this, and they identify this as a cruel practice, something that's completely unnecessary. So I see that here, but I see that in different countries as well. Circuses, aquariums, rodeos, we have those in North America. And the same thing is happening, is that people are becoming aware that this needs to be abolished.
One of the pictures in the book shows a little boy holding a cape.
Yeah.
Learning how to fight wolves. What is behind this picture?
So it must have been about 6 or 7 years ago now that I was working here in Spain with Igualdad Animal. Animal equality, I'm probably not saying it right, but we went to a bullfighting school, and that was fascinating to see all these young people, very young people, training to become matadors. And we asked this young child, he must have been about 6 or 7 years old, why he wanted to be a bullfighter, and he answered, because I love bulls. That's so interesting. So who taught him that, right? Children are very compassionate, and yet that we grow out of that sort of because we're taught to, because we're not encouraged to feel empathy for animals. So he's being taught at a very young age that bulls, deserve no respect. And that was fascinating. He is an example of cognitive dissonance, where we believe one thing or we care about animals in a certain way, but we treat them in another way. And of course, he doesn't have the ability to understand cognitive dissonance, but we do. We just don't think about it. We don't know about it. So it's important to discuss cognitive dissonance and see how our actions don't reflect our thinking, and those things need to be in line so that we can just be more ethical and healthier people intellectually and emotionally. Yeah.
During your travels all around the world, you have seen the better and the worst part of our relationship with animals. Which story remains in your memory apart from Ron's story?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a lot of animals who stay with me in my heart, and that's a tough place to go to because I can cry quite easily thinking about all these animals. So, I have them tucked away deep, deep, and there are lots of them. And though I have lots of individual stories to tell and that I can share and will share, I will say that the hardest thing that stays with me is that I have to leave all the animals that I photograph. I'm there to take their picture, to document how they live and die at our hands, but I can't save them. And I've met hundreds of thousands of animals now, and I make contact with them. I make eye contact with them. I take their photograph, and then I walk away. And I would say that for me is constantly the most difficult thing, because I more than anyone want to liberate all of these animals, and no one else who ever goes to that farm is going to do that for them. Like, I'm their only hope, me and the activists that I'm with, and yet we're not even going to do it. Like, it's just really, really heartbreaking. But one story that I'd like to share with you is Kiska. She's an orca whale, and she. We need to fight for these animals. When we hear stories like hers, it's just too heartbreaking beyond words. She knew the wild because she was caught in the wild off the coast of Iceland, and then she was moved to Marineland in Canada, this terrible aquarium. And she was caught with other orcas. The other orcas eventually died. She was impregnated 5 times. She gave birth 5 times, and all of her babies died. And so she's lived alone in this ironically named Friendship Cove for 40 years now. And it's bad enough if they're bred in captivity, but it's even worse if they have known the wild and they have been removed from their friends and their environment. And she lives in a tank, and it takes her 1 minute to circumnavigate this tank. And the frustration that she must feel every day, she must be crazy at this point, to have people staring at her day in and day out, pointing their finger. She looks at us through the glass. She does another lap. She opens her mouth and makes these sounds, and we don't know what she's saying. We can only imagine. But so it's animals like Kiska that remind me every day to work for change, and they deserve so much more than what we do to them.
What feeling are they supposed to have?
I think what I'd like for people to take away from the book is to see animals through new eyes. And or to see them at all. And that comes back to the invisible animals. We just don't see them. So the book is to make these animals visible and to consider them, and hopefully to act on their behalf. There are so few animal advocates in the world, and the animals need every single one of us to do whatever we can. And so I hope that the book inspires people to take part in the animal movement. It's a very exciting place to be. It's where we need to be. The animals need it, and the earth needs it. So hopefully people will come on board and do what they can.
After all you have seen, why do you think people chooses to devote their lives to protect animals?
Well, devoting our lives, or at least some time, to animal rights is the right thing to do, because it's about equality. We often get asked as activists, why aren't you fighting for humans? But first of all, a lot of people are. Way more people are fighting for the rights of humans than they are for animals, so there's that. And animals have no one to represent them legally. That's changing. No one speaks up for them, and because we don't have a common language, we do whatever we want to them. However, ethology and other forms of science have showed us that animals are sentient beings, and we don't need science for that anyway. We know, because we interact with our cats and our dogs. We know there's someone in there. And this is plainer than ever now. And so speaking up on behalf of animals, not eating animals, not attending the rodeo and circuses and all the things that we can do to get them out of the situations we've put them in is the right thing to do. It's the ethical thing to do. It's the way of the future. Animal abuse eventually is going to be part of our history. And so, as people often say, choose to be on the right side of history and work on behalf of those we are using. Whether it's animals, whether it's humans, whether it's the environment, it's time for all of us to speak up. The time is now. It's an emergency. So everyone should get on board.
The last 2 words we can read on We Animals in your own handwriting are hold fast. Why should we keep holding fast regarding animal cruelty?
So some of the last words we see in We Animals is hold fast, and it's written in my own writing. And we need to keep hope at the center of everything that we do. We need to hold on to what we're doing, and I know that animal rights is an uphill battle. It's a very difficult place to be because there are a lot of challenges. But as I said before, the animals have so few of us speaking up for them and advocating for them that they can't afford to lose us. We can't afford to burn out. We can't afford to be so depressed and disillusioned with the state of things that we leave, because the animals need us to stay. And so that's why we need to take care of ourselves. We need to focus on change, focus on hope. You know, just keep your eye on the prize, which is animal justice. And just one step at a time, one day at a time, work towards that. And that's the best we can do. I think that for me personally, if I look at the abuse and everything that's happening in the world, I'm easily overwhelmed. And I just want to chuck in the towel because it's too painful. But what I focus on is every day reaching one person, saying one thing, doing one thing, one day after the next, one foot in front of the other, in this really important fight. And that's what keeps me sane, and that's why I'm able to stay hopeful. And so that I encourage everyone to do the same. Stay hopeful, keep your eye on the prize, one day at a time, and we'll get there.